This memory blanket just feels like a warm hug. It was such a pleasure to make, so let me show you how I made it. Hello everybody, welcome to Catherine Sews. Thank you so much for joining me today. So you know I like to play around with t-shirts and make something new out of something old, and so that is definitely what I'm going to be doing today. I've got 14 t-shirts here, and while I'm hoping for a happy ending for this video, it is a sad story of where this video is coming from. We did recently have a loss in our extended family, and a very much loved man passed away. So shortly after his memorial service, I sent a message to his wife saying, if you would like to, I would love to make a memory blanket from some of his old t-shirts. She liked the idea and she got together 14 t-shirts for me. I think that a memory blanket made out of a loved one's clothing can be such a source of comfort because we have such an intimate connection with our clothing, don't we? All of these t-shirts were not only worn by him, but were something significant to him. So I'm calling it a memory blanket, not a memory quilt, because as you know, I have dabbled in quilting, but I am by no means an expert. And so it's going to be a memory blanket. I'm just hoping that it's a nice source of comfort for the family and that it provides some happy reflection with all of the different memories that these t-shirts bring back. So that's what I'm doing today. I'm going to do it in as straightforward and simple a way as I can because, as I say, I'm not a quilting expert. I'm actually going to use the fronts and the backs. I kind of like that rather than all of the blocks having a design. I think it's kind of nice to have some blank spaces where the eye can rest. Those blank blocks would give you an opportunity to do some embroidery or some Cricut design, like something that you can add in other memories or quotes or important dates or something like that that were significant in a person's life. Even so, with the 14 blocks with the design on it and the 14 solid blocks, that gives me 28 blocks. I think I'll do this quilt 5 blocks by 6. So that means I need 30 blocks. So I'm short 2 blocks. So what I think I'll do for those 2 is sort of cut those like corner ones into 4 and fill in that way. The other things I'm going to need then for this project are a Tricot interfacing. I'm going to be interfacing the back of all of those blocks. And I do like a Tricot interfacing rather than a non-woven. I really like the Tricot. It's like, it is a knit and it's just soft. I just really want this blanket to have that softness and that comforting factor to it. For the back, I think I'm going to go and buy some fleece. Really soft, maybe a light gray or a medium gray fleece that would kind of be a good neutral for all of these. So I'm going to do the back and the binding all in one with the fleece. And I'm still debating if I'm going to use a batting inside or not. The fact that I'm calling it a blanket could mean that I can get away without that batting. I'm just going to feel what it feels like once I am able to find that fleece. 1 layer of t-shirt knit with 1 layer of fleece, is that enough? So that's a debate that I'll think my way through as we go along here. So for that fleece, I'm going to need, I think, about 4 meters or just over 4 yards so that I can piece it together for the back of the blanket. So that's what I'm doing this week. If that sounds good to you, then let's get busy. I have a piece of Bristol board that I had folded in half and cut out a 15-inch square out of the middle. So then what I did is I just cut the angles so then I can kind of move in. So that is 11 by, let's say 12 and a half. So 11 by 12 and a half, I'm going to add 1 inch to both of those directions to give me 1/2 inch seam allowance. So that means I'm going to cut my pieces 12 by 13 and a half. Okay, so I'm going to tape this frame together to be 12 by 13 and a half. And this side I'll mark 13 and a half. And on this side I'll mark 12. And now I can use the lines on my table to make sure I'm staying at right angles. So I'm lined up with the points and with the line on my table. And it is such a nice little luxury to have a one-handed tape dispenser, and better for the environment. We're not throwing out plastic packages every time we finish our tape. So that is a nice little indulgence. I love having that. And then 1 t-shirt at a time, because I want to frame the design. I'm going to be cutting right through front and back because I'm going to be using the backs as well as those solid color blocks, just so I don't turn these accidentally sideways, because that is something I would do. I'm just going to mark this as top. And then just with my little scrap of soap, I'll just mark each of these t-shirts. Just like that. I love it already. Alrighty, So 14 t-shirts just like that. I'll check the back of each one before I lie it down too, because some of them do have things on the back, and I'm not chucking out anything here because I'm definitely going to be using some of these on 2 of the corners at least, and maybe more. So some of these have stains because he wore them to work. Once I sew that, I will be losing the edge, but I think that's okay. It's quite satisfying, isn't it? And this one has a little bit on the back too. Okay, so some of these are really stained, but that's what the family gave me. I would imagine those stains actually have some sentimental value to them because of the work that he did and was so passionate about. I'm not going to worry about them. So when there's a big graphic like this, I kind of have to make a judgment call. But this frame helps so much, right? Like I think that still looks great. I am sad to lose the palm trees, but I don't think I have a lot of choice, and I'm still really, really happy with that. I'm leaving a bit of a gap here so that I still have seam allowance. That should be good. So maybe I'll keep this part. Like that looks good, right? And on the back, that works out great. There is a case to be made for doing the front and back separately because yes, that writing is all crooked. Am I going to let myself worry about it? Not at this point. So for this one, I do definitely have to cut the front and back separately. This is the back, and I can feel right here is the neckband. So if I just cut like this, then this piece is not going to be usable because it'll include the neckband. So that means I'm just going to chop up the sides and around the sleeve so that I can refold it to bring the back down a bit. In fact, not around the sleeve, through the sleeve. That's better. So now I want to fold it kind of more toward the front. There, so now the 2 neck bands are even, and that front insignia is about there, so I should be safe. So now, on the white t-shirts, I shall have to use friction pen. And there's a link to these in the description, as always, because they are some of my favorite sewing tools. That looks good, and that'll do. And then the piece that I cut out of the middle, I'm going to cut to the finished size of the block. So instead of 12 by 13 and a half, it'll be 11 by 12 and a half. And this is what I will use to cut the interfacing. So I've folded my interfacing and I've got 4 layers of it. So that'll keep everything soft and not stiff. It'll keep the t-shirt a bit more stable for me. So because I've got 4 layers, I've just traced this 7 times and then I'm just gonna cut. So the interfacing does not include seam allowance. So just like that till I have 28. So now at the iron, on the back of each of my rectangles, I'll take my interfacing, the gluey side goes down onto wrong side, and I can kind of manipulate the t-shirt fabric so that it is like that consistent seam allowance sticking out past the interfacing, right? You can sort of bend and shape that t-shirt. It's got a lot of give and play. Okay, so 28 times just like that. It really does make it nice and soft. I think that Tricot interfacing is a really good way to go. I can layer the pieces as I fuse on the interfacing, and then they just get more and more fusy. Okay, so just like that, 28 times. But I want this quilt to be 5 blocks by 6 blocks, so I need 2 more blocks. So I'm going to create a 9 patch at each corner, and so I need 9 light pieces and 9 dark pieces. This new little frame is 5 inches by 5 5/8, so that when I sew 9 of them together, it should theoretically equal one of the bigger pieces. And I'm also working on an idea of what to do with the leftovers, because there's a lot of good material left over. And then the part that I cut out of the center to make my little frame, I'm now going to trim seam allowance off of that. So 1/2 inch off all the way around. And then I need to cut 18 pieces of interfacing. And then iron those all on. All of the small pieces are cut and interfaced, and I've kind of arranged them into 2 9 patches. And now I'm going to sew these together in the exact same way that I'll be sewing the whole blanket together. I'll be sewing them in strips and then sewing the strips together. That is standard practice. If you're not a quilter, that's sort of the standard way of doing it. Make your strips and then sew those together. So I'm just going to be clipping them together into the strips how I want them to be arranged. Okay, so my first sewing step is to join all of those pieces together. So let's go. So because I've got all of these different t-shirt knits, and some are cottons and some are polycottons, I definitely want to make sure I've got a ballpoint needle in there. Some of these knits would be fine with a universal and some would get little holes, and I just don't want to take a chance. So ballpoint it is. And my stitch I'm going to use is like a stretched out zigzag. So the width is just 1 millimeter wide and the length is 2.5 millimeters. And I'm just going to be chaining all of these pieces together. And the thread I'm using is this medium gray because I think it kind of blends in with most of these pieces and it matches the back I'm going to use. So all chained together, I'll just snip them apart. That stretched out zigzag just has a little bit of built-in stretch to it. And you know what? I don't have to worry so much as I'm doing these vertical seams. There's not that much stretch and the interfacing is keeping it quite stable. But when I get to the horizontal ones, the fabric will have more stretch. And so just to be safe, I think it's good to use a stitch that has a bit of stretch. So now with the iron, I want to press all my seams going toward the darker fabric. And I can use my clapper to make sure that those seams stay nice and flat. And now I just need to trim them up. I'm just going to trim up the horizontal lines first of all and make sure that they are 5 5/8 tall. So first I want to get a nice straight line and then cut off at 5 5/8. Okay, so now the beauty of having pressed all the seam allowance toward the darker color means that it's going to make it so much easier to match the seams, right? You'll feel if there's an overlap, that'll cause a bump, and you'll feel if there's a gap in between. What you want to feel is that they just slide right in together and they just nuzzle up. So I'm pinning the seam to the seam on both of those. And I think pins are good on this step because you do want to try to be as precise as you can there. And as I sew, I want to make sure that I keep the seam allowance going the direction that I pressed it. I don't let it flip over, especially on the underside where I can't see it. I have to kind of feel, maybe take a little peek and make sure my seam allowance is going the way I pressed it. So if you've never done any quilting before, starting with a little 9 patch like this is kind of a perfect practice piece because, as I said, this is the exact same technique I'm going to use for the entire rest of the quilt. So put it how you want it to end up and flip it right side together. Okay, so I'll just sew those 4 seams and then go back to the iron. Okay, I just lost some footage of sewing all of those horizontal seams, and I tried to keep the seam allowance going the way I pressed it. So those are all sewn. And then I want to check my seam matching before I go to the iron. So I'd say that is within my tolerance. That's pretty good. This one is pushing my limits. I don't love it. That's what I like. That's perfect. And so is this. That's what I'm after. So how much am I going to let that bother me? A little bit. I'm going to fix it. So I can feel a little gap right there. So all I'm going to do, it's only going to take a minute. I'm going to just snip my stitches for about like a 2-inch section, 5 centimeters, and pull that thread out and just try it again. So again, I want to get those seams right snuggled in. And here's one nice thing about working with the knits is that it's got that little bit of give. So I think it's gonna do it for me. And I don't like going over pins on this machine, so I'll take it out at the last second. And good and better. Okay, I'm gonna live with that. And I might try to budge that one over a smidge too. It's pretty okay, but at this early stage of the game, I should have more patience than I might have toward the end of the project. Oh, that's like a millimeter better, right? Okay, fine. And now I'm just going to press the seam allowances all in toward the center. I love it. It's beautiful. To trim up my 9 patches, I've come back to the frame and I've made little marks, like a black mark in the center and red marks dividing each side into 3. So if I can get all those little red marks hitting a seam, then I know I'm doing pretty well. Good, love it. So that means all of my patches are ready, and now I need to kind of go and lay them all out and make a plan. So I laid the pieces out on a bed and then rearranged until the pattern was pretty even, and then I clipped all the rows together, and now I'm using the same stitch, same needle to sew all of those vertical seams. Okay, so there's the first strip done. So I just have to do 5 more strips like that. Okay, so now it's time to press my seams, and my pattern no longer alternates between light and dark. It's kind of random. So there's no point in pressing my seam allowance toward the dark because that's not going to help me with seam matching. That only helps if, like in those little 9 patches, the lights and darks alternated. So instead of going in one direction, I'm going to press them all open and flat. Some people call that butterflying your seam allowance. As long as it's nice and flat, I will be happy. I am glad that my interfacing does not come to the edge because I don't need to worry at all about getting glue on my iron. So I'll just press all those vertical seams just like that. So now I've got all of the strips bundled up and they're in order. So starting from the top to the bottom. So I can just take the first 2. Now then, this one goes there. I want it to end up like that. So just flip right side together. And then I'm just going to pin each set of seams. I want to go into the seam on one side and come out on the seam at the other side. So I kind of weave the pin back and forth. That's how I'm going to match the seams on these horizontals. And if you like working with a walking foot, this is probably perfect time to use it. I've just never become a fan of mine, and so I'm just going to stick with my normal presser foot. There we go. So I'll sew one and come back and pin the next. And I'm going to take out that pin at the last second. I want to make sure my seam allowance stays the way it's pressed. Okay, so there we go. The first 2 strips are sewn together. I like that one very much. And then that'll do. So I think I will press this seam open and flat before I go and pin on the next one. And yes, if you're wondering if these stains are killing me, yes, they absolutely are killing me. But I'm just gonna assume that this t-shirt has special significance. They must have done a nice family trip there, because otherwise that would not have made it into the quilt. That's okay. That's okay. Alrighty, so now this is the next one. Put them how you want them to be and flip right side together. Okay, and then I'm just going to pin, sew, press, and keep adding on until I get all 6 strips together. I don't want to have any dark threads around the white squares because they will shadow through. Okay, so yes, I really can't continue with those stains. I just can't do it. Laying on my table was this heart that I had just used in a recent video. And so I played around with that, and I've got the green t-shirt, and I've ironed on a couple of the extra squares of the interfacing. I'm just going to trace this. I could have used something like Transweb. That would have actually made it even a little bit easier. So I'm going to go like pinky finger width bigger. And that is better, right? I would say so. That is better than that, right? And now's the time to do it before I put the back on. And there's still some subtle little stains there, but nothing as bad as those. I think that's better. I could maybe put a third one up there. Oh, maybe I could. And then maybe I could Cricut the names of his 2 kids and his wife. That's nice. Okay, I shall do that. Alrighty, one more heart coming right up. Oh, that's sweet. I really like that. That adds a nice touch, right? Okay. So I have to switch thread to this light green color. So the Cricut works great, and I printed up one of his favorite sayings, and I'm going to put that on one of the blank squares, which is roughly in the middle of the quilt. I think that'll do. For the hearts, I decided to print a heart with the Cricut with their names in it and then cut it out. So I won't be using the first hearts that I cut. So instead, I've interfaced 2 more of the rectangles, and I'll just iron on their hearts. Okay, phew. Okay, so now I'll just be zigzagging these onto this giant thing. If I wasn't crossing over between squares, it would be 100% easier to just zigzag this to the separate square before joining it into a giant quilt. But that is the situation I'm finding myself in. So here we go. And I thought maybe of trying free motion, but it's just too hard to be that accurate with it. So I'm just going to try zigzagging straight on here. So far, so good. So I'm using a zigzag that is 2.5 millimeters wide and just 1 millimeter long. Oh, and I did change my thread to better match this green. So you see how this is getting to be a little trickier as I go around the top of the heart. There's a lot of stuff going in here. There, just pivot back the other way when it gets to be too much. I actually love that. It's so sweet. Okay, here we go. All right. I absolutely love that. So sweet, right? I love it. I want to give a final press to these 3 hearts just to make them lay nice and flat and to sort of set the thread. So I will definitely use parchment on top so that I don't wreck my Cricut. And then look at that. They just look like they were meant to be there. So cute. There we go. Oh my gosh, I love that. So once the face was all together, then I laid the backing out on top of a bed with the wrong side facing up, and then laid the quilt down onto that with the right side facing up. And then I pinned all the seams and around the edges. When I pinned it around, I made sure that I had at least 1 inch, preferably 2 inches, all the way around the perimeter. So now everything is pinned. So I'm not using a batting. I decided against it because with this sweatshirt backing, it's already kind of fuzzy and puffy, but also it's heavy. It's got quite a bit of weight to it. So I've just pinned those 2 layers. Even though it's a blanket, not a quilt, I'm still going to kind of quilt by stitching in the ditch of all of the seams. So I've got it kind of rolled up. I'm going to start toward the center and work my way out toward the sides. So if I still want to use a zigzag that has a bit of built-in stretch, I'll try the width being at 1.5 millimeters and the length being at 2.5. So lots and lots of pins for this step because you know it's going to be shifting around a lot. So that looks okay. I think I can live with that. So with this side rolled up, it'll slip into the machine pretty good. Okay, I feel like a little bump there, and I just don't want to sew that. So that's what I was hoping the pins would help me avoid. Okay, I think that went okay. I'm going to check out the back of it before I continue. Yep, I think it's okay. So I'll just sew the rest of those seams vertical from the center working out and then horizontal same way. If you like using a walking foot, use it now. This is where I think I really should probably get into that. And on the edge, I'm just increasing my stitch length to 5, just so that I can easily pull it out. I think I'm going to prefer pulling this one out at the end. Okay, so horizontals now the same way. So I'm starting again around that center strip, and then I'll work my way out. And I've been finding that if I give the top layer especially a little bit of a stretch as I go, it seems to work out better. Okay, now here at these hearts that cross the line, I'm definitely going to do a tiny back tack and jump over. I'm not going to sew straight across the heart. Okay, I'm loving that. So I'll finish the horizontals in the same way. Okay, so I've stitched in the ditch of all of those seams, and stretching it on the top layer definitely helped. I did get a little bit of this kind of thing happening, right, where the back gets pushed. I think a walking foot would have helped with that. I'm gonna not worry about it. If you are a traditional quilter, that would probably drive you wild. But if you're a traditional quilter, I honestly don't think you would love quilting with t-shirt fabrics. It just doesn't behave the same way as a woven fabric. So I'm just going to go with the whole concept that t-shirts are casual, and I'm just going to be more casual about it. So now I've got this little bit of extra fabric all the way around the outside, and I've got my 2-inch ruler, and I'm going to lay the 1.25 inch line right on my edge. So I'm leaving like 1.25 inches or 3 centimeters all the way around. And as my quilt wobbles, so will my ruler. I'll just follow that. So I never have less than 1.25 inches. And honestly, on a traditional quilt, not that I've made very many, but when I do, or when I get my students to make traditional quilts, we leave 1 inch, not 1.25 inches. So 2.5 centimeters, not 3. But I think it kind of looks nice having a little bit of a bigger border, like a heftier, chunkier border like this. So I'm going to be wrapping that extra fabric around to the front, and it just frames it all nicely and quite easily. I think I'll switch to a rotary cutter for these long cuts. I could just use my big ruler and cut directly. I'm just scared though. I'm scared I'll make a mistake. And by the way, it's been a long time since I've said this, but never ever use a rotary cutter with one of these thin rulers. Super dangerous. The rotary cutter can just jump right on top of that ruler and you will be cut. And it can even cut your ruler. So I want to create a binding here, and normally I would just press that in so the edges touch and then press again, miter the corners, and then sew here. But because this is all stretchy and crazy, I want to stabilize this. I just looked around and I can't find in my stash any like knit stay tape, but that's what I want, a knit stay tape. But when I cut all of these pieces, I saved all of these long skinny bits of interfacing. So I'm going to cut strips of interfacing that just fit in here. So if they were, let's say 3/4 inch or 2 centimeters wide, that should be good. And I don't think they have to be particularly perfect. And I might as well get smart and use the lines on my table. So that should be fine. I more or less want this going down the middle of that strip. And I don't want to stretch these strips of interfacing because they will curl right up. All around, all 4 sides. I don't really have to get right into the corners because they're going to get cut off anyway. So now that I've got the interfacing around all 4 sides, now I just turn my edge so that this outer edge just touches the edge of the quilt. At the corners, I just fold over, but then I will come back in and miter those before I sew this. So here's how I miter the corners really nice and easily. So bring it back to back at the point, right out to the point. And what you want to do is sew perpendicular to the fold and just stop at this fold. So to find your line, the easiest way is to just bring this down till that edge is even, all 4 edges even, and you're coming right out to the point there. And that's your line. See what I mean? It's like, it's just perpendicular to that fold and you just stop right at that fold. If you really get that angle nice, it makes a really nice miter. I'm going to sew there and then cut off the extra. So the fold is just straight across the machine, and that's how I can sew perpendicular and stop right at that fold. So once you've sewn it, you trim off the extra, poke that corner out nice and pointy, and then the edges just fold in. There's my basting thread, which I will be pulling out, but isn't that a nice, easy way to do the corner? And then you just pin all the way around. I've done most of it while I was waiting for my camera to recharge. So it's actually almost done. I like to pin this directionally. It's too skinny of a piece to get your, like, I don't know, that's not very convenient. So I always just think edge on my right, pins pointing away so that it's easier at the machine. And then I'm just going to sew nice and close to that inside edge. And having that interfacing inside this edge has been a blessing. It's so nice and stable and not stretchy. It's just been so easy to go around this whole edge. Phew, that is done. I'll show you why I want to take out that basting stitch, right? It just doesn't look very good on the back, but it comes out really easily since I use that long stitch length. So that'll just pull right out. And then when I give that a little bit of a steam, those needle holes will come out as well. I can't believe the weight of this thing. It's so heavy. I'm glad I didn't put any batting. It really does not need it. The fleece is like soft and cozy enough. So that's it. I'll just take out my basting stitch and trim any threads, and then this is done. Oh, I really enjoyed making this though. It's been lovely. All right, I can't wait to show you the whole thing. Well, my goodness, this was such a pleasure to make. It's so nice. Like the way that it feels is comforting, and that's what I really had hoped for. And it has that weight. Like, have you seen weighted blankets for sale? It's supposed to be comforting, and this has a beautiful weight and softness to it. And of course, it has all of these t-shirts that have so much significance to him and his family. So it was my absolute joy to make it. I love the 9 patches on the 2 corners. I love how that used up extra little bits of interesting parts of the t-shirts. And most of all though, I love those personal details with the names of the family in the hearts. I didn't put his name because it's all about what he loved and about his life. And so that's why I thought it was just best to put the family's names. And I just think I love it. I also am so thrilled with how the corners all turned out and that edge. And that's a pretty easy technique, right? Just cutting the back that little bit bigger, trimming it down nice and even all the way around, mitering your corners and wrapping it over like that looks pro and it's not that difficult. And then of course, Carpe Diem, which is apparently how he woke his kids up every day, telling them to seize the day, live your life to the fullest. And I think that that is something that he did and that we all should think about more often. So I am thrilled with this. I love the feel of it. I love how it looks on the bed in our guest room. I think it just looks really cottagey and cozy. And so I hope that they find a place for it in their home. And even if it's just sort of tossed on a couch and they just pick it up whenever they want a little bit of comfort, that is the goal. So that was so much fun for me. That was really a labor of love. I hope you enjoyed watching it. And until next time on Catherine Sews, you take care.